Turmoil in the Liberal Party shows no sign of abating. Wentworth pre-selectors rebuff to Scott Morrison caps week of mayhem. In the early hours of Friday morning, the Liberal pre-selectors of Wentworth delivered their new Prime Minister a humiliating public slapdown in selecting Dave Sharma, 42, former Australian ambassador to Israel and now a partner in an accountancy firm, as the candidate for the October 20 by-election. The pre-selectors have on all accounts chosen the best candidate. But Scott Morrison had made it known he wanted a woman, a preference that's been embarrassingly rejected. Catherine O'Regan, who was supposed to come out the winner, ran fifth. Moreover, on Thursday it was learned that John Howard and Malcolm Turnbull were both encouraging Mr Sharma to stay in the contest. So the two former Prime Ministers managed to do over the current Prime Minister. Well, so much for the short-term unity in the Liberal Party after the turfing of Malcolm Turnbull. Things don't look particularly good. I believe that actions speak louder than words. And Scott Morrison's actions in basically endorsing a candidate for Wentworth on their genitalia as opposed to their merit is just a very bad sign. It says to me that Scott Morrison is basically PC personified. And this is exactly what we don't want from a Conservative government. This absurd thing of thinking that diversity should be given preference over merit is crazy, absolutely crazy, because I'm sure that this cannot possibly be embraced by business and government as a tenet. It's just ridiculous. Every candidate should be chosen on merit. It is the fairest and the best way to get the people with the talent and motivation to do jobs. I mean, it's absurd to think of it any other way. You know, Scott Morrison really has shown his colours here. Mind you, to be fair to him, I will say that I was impressed with the fact that he rejected Turnbull's, that bitter and twisted Malcolm Turnbull call for Peter Dutton to be challenged in the High Court for his legitimacy to be a Member of Parliament because he has an interest in childminding centres. Scott Morrison, to his credit, did actually reject that idea from Turnbull. But unfortunately, there's so many rats in the ranks of the Liberal Party. There are a number of members who are contemplating crossing the floor and allowing this to occur. Another waste of public money, but the Liberals don't care about that. They don't. They have absolutely no interest in cutting back the bloated public service. They just basically push for ridiculously expensive projects like the Snowy Point 2.0, and I think that's actually another thing that Morrison still wants to go ahead with, which is just insane. It's going to cost more energy to produce that electricity than it actually puts into the grid. It's insanity. Because it's actually green, people seem to be embracing it, and that's insane as well. It just seems as though we've lost the plot in this country. So look, I'm afraid that this is another black mark for Scott Morrison. I'm only judging him on what he's doing. He still is clinging to the big Australian ideas, so he's not going to cut immigration by one person. He basically wants the place flooded, Melbourne and Sydney to be totally flooded with immigrants, and I think that's insane. And the other thing that Scott Morrison is totally intransigent on is the Paris Agreement. Australians hate the fact that their national sovereignty is being challenged by this Paris Agreement. We don't want our future to be determined by some committee in Paris. It's ridiculous. And I've got to say, Paris is a bit of a crap hole itself these days. They've got their own problems with their diversity. There's so many no-go areas in Paris. It was a beautiful city. I saw it years ago, probably more in its prime. I don't think I'd even contemplate going there anymore. And I certainly wouldn't contemplate going to the UK, which has now become basically a police state. And the other place I'd avoid, which I've been to, is San Francisco, which again is a beautiful city, but now is basically junkies. You've got to dodge junkies' needles and the homeless defecating in the streets. It's not a pretty sight. And mind you, I think the whole of California's in trouble. So there are a few places in the world that are following these progressive policies, and they're paying the price. And unfortunately, I think the Scott Morrison is heavily entrenched in that PC mould. He's done some things that have been laudable, but the basics, like this Paris Agreement, like the immigration, he has done nothing to turn 180 on these, and that's what I was hoping for. So I'm afraid that I would predict that the polls are going to look very ugly for Scott Morrison in the near future. There's no guarantee that the Liberals will win Wentworth, even if they have got the best candidate. It's a by-election and anything could happen. And remember, the people of Wentworth are a bit loopy. They're the ones who actually kept supporting Turnbull, and I find Turnbull totally detestable. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, I wish we could just strip him of his citizenship. In my opinion, he doesn't deserve to have Australian citizenship because he hasn't acted like a patriot to this country. He's basically acted more like a traitor, selling us out to all international interests, including the UN and the Paris Agreement. So I have no time whatsoever for Turnbull. Scott Morrison looks good compared to him, but that's all I'll say as far as Scott Morrison's concerned. He lacks the substance to get the Liberals over the line, and Bill Shorten is basically salivating in the background, waiting for either an election cause because of Scott Morrison will soon have a minority government, or an election early next year when it's due. Either way, it's looking incredibly ugly. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you, or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.